I'll delve back into the past again with this video and cover off this strip down and rebuild of the gearbox. I don't believe there was anything wrong with the box before I pulled it apart, but I wanted the casings vapor blasted to match the engine. One benefit of owning and working on a Guzzi is the amount of reference information available on the internet, and for the gearbox there is an excellent document written by a chap called John Noble which gives a detailed walkthrough of the process to strip and rebuild it. I'll include a link in the description below. So what you will see in this video will be a collection of pictures that I took whilst following John's document. The first thing that I did was remove the clutch pushrod assembly from the rear of the box. To remove the nut and the gear on the input shaft and the nut on the output shaft, I needed to prevent the shafts from rotating and did so via this crude arrangement using a piece of notched mild steel bar and some wooden blocks. I think I attempted to remove the input shaft nut with a hammer and drift to no avail, so ended up buying the Guzzi tool. At around 60 quid at the time, this was a lot of money for a tool that I would only get to use twice. But hey ho. I'm pretty sure that I needed an impact wrench to loosen the nut on the output shaft. I then removed the tacho drive gear, the gearbox vent and the gear change lever. I don't have a picture, but I must have also removed the neutral detent plunger at this time. There are 10 bolts holding the end casing on. All of mine appear to have been previously swapped out for stainless Allen cap bolts. With these removed the end case, and going by my pictures, most of the gearbox contents were pulled out. With the various shafts removed from the end case, I removed all other components and all of the bearings. I needed to use a bearing puller for the one at the rear end of the input shaft. With the box apart, the casings were given a good clean and sent off for vapor blasting. The results of the vapor blasting speak for themselves. Reassembly was a challenge, but would have been much more so without John's document to guide me. First, everything was thoroughly cleaned, and I'm pretty sure that I replaced all of the bearings, but looking at my pictures now, maybe I reused a couple of the old ones. I did not disassemble the shafts, which using Guzzi's terminology are the clutch, main and the lay shaft. There is also the gear selector drum. After fitting the bearings, the 3 shafts, in the order I just called out, were inserted back into the main casing. These were followed by the gear selector drum and the selector forks, where the fun really started. Like many parts of the rebuild, I had these shafts in and out of the casing so many times that I'm sure I could have done it in the dark by the time I finished. I'm not getting into the detail in this video, but there were also a handful of washers and shims that needed to go in with the various shafts. I fitted new oil seals on both the input and output shafts, but before refitting the nut and the gear to the input shaft, I did use a ladder for aligning the clutch when I rebuilt the engine. Due to the damage incurred as a result of my botched attempt to remove the nut on the input shaft, I fitted a new one. With the gear select and mechanism dropped in place on the end case, I refitted it along with its 10 bolts. I reused the old nut on the output shaft rather than fit a new one. With the end case back on, the various external parts such as the neutral light indicator switch, clutch push rod, drain plugs, filler cap, etc. were all refitted. Again, I'm not going into that level of detail, but all O-rings and gaskets were replaced with new items. Reattaching the gearbox to the engine block was a bit tricky, mainly due to having to support the weight of the gearbox whilst jiggling it to get the gear on the input shaft to align with the clutch. Once aligned, it was bolted back in place. Unlike the engine which I have tested since I rebuilt it, I have not been able to test the gearbox under load, although I do know that each gear and neutral can be selected. Having said that, I don't anticipate any issues for when I do get to use it. Thanks for watching.